Hey, modern math teacher. Today we're diving into one of the biggest conversations happening in education right now, artificial intelligence, and what that really means for teaching and learning. But instead of only focusing on whether students should or shouldn't be using AI, today's conversation asks a deeper question. What is AI actually revealing about the way our education system currently works? My guest today is Aron Boxer, CEO and founder of Diversified Education Services. Aron is a former special education teacher and an executive functioning specialist who has worked directly with students and families for more than 15 years. With a master's degree, certification in learning disabilities, and experience as both a classroom teacher and director of special services, Aron brings a holistic, relationship based approach to learning. In today's episode, we are going to talk about why AI adoption among students has accelerated so quickly, what meaningful human development looks like in a world where information really isn't scarce, and why student AI use may actually be a symptom of deeper educational challenges, and how educators can preserve human connection in classrooms where AI tools are increasingly present. Let's join me in welcoming Aron to the show. Right. Welcome, Aron. I'm so excited to have you here. Now, in our intro, I did touch that you were in education for over 15 years. I would love to know just a little bit more about your time as a teacher and then what sparked your interest in AI before we really dive in.
Well, thanks. It's great to be here. Right. So I started in education back in 2009, and I worked in finance before. And during the financial crisis, I decided that I needed to try something new. And I was volunteering at my martial arts gym. And I had told the sensei that I needed to cut back on costs. And he said, "Hey, if you can help out with the kids' classes, I'll waive your fee." And I was like, "Okay, that's great." And I seem to get along really well with kids who are just like me, a little misbehaving, not able to focus, a little hyperactive. And
Sure.
my mom worked in special education for 50 years. And so I kind of moved some pieces around. I said, maybe this is in my nature to work with kids with special needs. So I wound up getting a master's and a certification. And I worked in public schools for 7 years as a special education teacher, and
Wow.
then 2 years as an administrator. So, and I started my private practice right at the beginning of my teaching. So that's why, yes, since 2009 is when I started.
That's amazing. And I teach a lot of students. I'm still in the classroom. I have a lot of students in my classes who have special needs, and I have so much respect for my co teachers. So, thank you for being one of our amazing special educators for 7 years and for starting what you're doing now and continuing to help support all of those students and all of us teachers. I know we appreciate it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'd love to know a little bit about like how you got interested in AI.
So it was funny how AI happened. I worked with a college student who was an older adult, and he went back to school, and he is level 1 autism. And when he would get hooked on something, he'd become obsessed about it. And he had to write a paper to graduate, and it was about AI. And it was kind of like doom and gloom.
Oh
And
no.
I didn't make much of it. I just thought he was exaggerating. And then was it 2023, one of my students was sitting right next to me and said, "Hey, did you hear about Chat GPT?" And I said, "What's Chat GPT?" And he showed it to me, and he put a prompt in, and it spatted out this essay. It was like perfect. It's like, oh my God, this is going to change everything. Like that right then and there, I
Yeah.
knew. And then I decided, like, I really need to get on the ball here. But like a lot of people, I was afraid of it. I was like, oh, is this going to replace me? Like, what is this all about?
Right.
So I decided that I wanted to become as much of an expert in that field as possible. And I found out that it is not a curse, it's an absolute blessing.
Absolutely. I love that you shared that it started with like that essay because when I first heard about AI and Chat GPT, I immediately thought it was just like the English teacher's version of Mathway. Like we've been dealing with photo math and generative responses to student homework in the math world forever. And so when this came up, I was like, no, I don't need to worry about it. That's only going to affect English classes. And then I started playing around with it myself and I was like, no, this is gonna be a game changer for everything.
Yeah, I assume that's the way they felt when the calculator came out. Did some reading about when the calculator was released, and supposedly the educators back then said, "Up, math is over. We're not going to need classes anymore." And then
Yeah,
right? At my age, when I was in my latter teens, when I first heard of the internet, and I guess I didn't work in education back then, but it was the same thing. Like, oh, we're not going to need to teach classes. Kids are just going to learn everything online. And some of them were right. We were going to learn online, but it just became one of the best tools. And like a lot of technology, it just made things a lot easier. It saved a lot of time if used correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the key here. I think you've got to make sure that whatever technology tools you are using them correctly. Because, like, I teach algebra too, and my students are trying to solve logarithmic equations. If they need a calculator to help support them with that, I'm all for that because I'm not assessing their ability to do those mental math skills anymore. Right?
Right.
It's matching the technology and the tool with an appropriate use. And I think that's what scares teachers about AI. They just don't know what that appropriate use might be or what impact it might have in their classrooms.
Right. And with anything new, I think even when the TI calculator came out, right after I left high school, the graphing calculators, the
Yeah.
technology really improved. And they can store information inside their
Mhm.
calculators, and now teachers will make them clear that out. And then they can hit undo. Like kids are very crafty when it comes to cutting corners when it comes to technology. ChatGPT just made it easier. So I feel like there's this back and forth of like teachers are trying to crack down on the cheating because there is cheating, but then
Absolutely.
also some kids use it effectively and we want to reward that. But I think that there's a huge disconnect between the two.
Yeah, yeah. I'd love to know. You're right. A lot of teachers feel like AI just like showed up overnight and just changed everything, just like you're saying the calculator did, and the internet back it way back when. What do you think you were really seeing right now in schools when it comes to AI and student usage?
Honestly, I feel like most kids, they just don't know how to use it effectively. I don't want to say they all cheat, but they have the right intention at times where they want to save time. Think
Hmm.
about you work with, I guess, juniors and sophomores,
Yep.
juniors and seniors,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
So I work with all ages, and especially the young boys. They like to rush through their work, especially in the elementary years. And I think
Hmm.
it's the same mindset where when they get a little bit older and they can self-regulate, they might not look to cut as many corners, but AI is just so tempting to just do the work for them. And for kids, when they go and take a test and they've been having AI do their homework, obviously their test grades are not going to follow suit. So I think that the tempting part of it, the ease of it, where I can go outside and I can play, or I can sit here for a little extra time and actually learn it. And for a lot of kids, they make the decision like, well, I can make up my grade with not just taking tests. I can make it up in science class with labs, or in English. I can write a really good paper and maybe use some AI as well. So I think trying to find the balance of what is helpful and can help them save time between that and what is just going to do the work for me, which is obviously going to expose them over time. And it's a struggle. It is a struggle.
Yeah, absolutely. So many people are quick to say that any use of AI is cheating, right? And then others are seeing it as more of that adaptation, and it really depends on which teacher you ask and quite honestly like what day of the week it is, how their students are engaging in their class there. How do you really interpret the rise in the student use of AI?
The rise is it's just everywhere.
Yeah.
On social media algorithms, they have all these different forms of AI that can be used for a particular type of class. I don't know if it was last year or the year before. I don't know how much you watch social media, but they had these reels that would come out. And I think some of them were staged where they would have a college student in a classroom who would show their computer and say, oh, I'm just having my AI take notes for me. But
Yeah.
we all know that for 99% of us, that writing it down will actually be useful in getting it into one's brain. And for assistive technology, as a special ed person, assistive technology was really important for kids with certain disabilities and who maybe
Absolutely.
had dysgraphia and couldn't write. So I think, again, it could be used in such positive ways, but the allure of saving time can sometimes interfere with their ability to master the material. So I
Yeah.
think that we're going to continue to see other ways that people can leverage AI. But for the most part, I think that it has cut down on one of the most important things, which is critical thinking.
Yeah, I could not agree more. They are so willing, and I don't want to say all of the students, right? We can never generalize to everyone, but a lot of people in general are willing to I don't know, like sell themselves short almost in just taking that easy road out and going to AI. I know I've even definitely been guilty of doing it, trying to write a birthday card for like a niece. I'm like, "Oh, it's a dinosaur themed gift. Help me write a birthday card because, and we can say there's math people and not math people and creative people and not creative people and all of that drives me bonkers." But I was like, I was just tapped out of my creativity for that day. So I fell prey to it. I definitely took the shortcut in that. So I can see how students, if they're in class and they're struggling with the concept or they're having a bad day, how that can be extra alluring for them.
Yes, it is very tempting. My 80-year-old mother came back from Africa, and she had this mystery illness and couldn't figure it out. And she is so into AI now. It's like her friend. It's like, oh, ChatGPT told me this or told me that. And it's like, this is like when we would tell people, don't go on WebMD and diagnose yourself.
Yes.
And it's like, we don't want to become so over reliant on the AI where we stop thinking. So one of the things I tell my students, and I try and do this as well, so I don't sound like a hypocrite, is I'll ask them, when you have that word on the tip of your tongue and it's there, but you just can't quite grasp it,
Yes.
don't go look it up. Allow your brain the chance to think and engage in that thinking skill, because it's so tempting to just pull out our phones or Google it or do anything that's going to cut the corner. But it's like exercising, right? If we don't work out, our muscles will get stale and our brain and our thinking gets stale if we don't use it. So finding that happy balance is so important.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to have to remember that and use that myself because you're right. When something's like right there and I'm like, ooh, I know it. And if I send it into any form of technology with just the right amount of information, it will give it back to me. But I love that idea of like, you're right. I do need to just let my brain take the time to process that information, go through the sorting process, right? And then pull that back out. I feel like that's a skill that a lot of us are losing, and so I'm curious your thoughts on what you think maybe AI is exposing in terms of like other shortcomings in our educational system.
AI, I think what it's exposing is a lot of falsities about what learning is about.
Mm,
And it has exposed the fact that schools are panicking, right? When they feel
yeah,
that they're losing the ability to monitor or measure and control student behavior. And some guardrails would make sense in the short term, but the main
sure.
strategy is policing. Schools are going to lose because you can't ban your way out of a technological shift that is this big. And when we're operating in a place of fear, it's not really a long-term educational strategy. And it's both AI is an evolution and it's also a major leap. And as an executive function coach, trying to teach kids about uh, judgment and communication and resilience, and most importantly, relationship building. Those cannot be replaced with artificial intelligence. So students needing to learn how to manage their time and ask really good questions and sustain their effort,
Yeah.
thinking independently. It's information is too easy to access. So it's exposing the fact that that kids have seen the other side. They see how easy it is to get that information. So it's like wisdom and the discipline that they get from that is not necessarily self-sustaining, and a lack of self-regulation is also feeding into it as well.
Oh my gosh. So much of what you said there is a big component. I think, with AI being introduced and it becoming so much easier to do some of those, I feel like they're lower level tasks. A lot of what we're seeing in terms of the need for control and compliance and memorization and all of this standardized testing is just kind of being exploded right now. It's teachers and admin are pushing back because AI is changing how we can look at those things and how we think about those things and really helping us ask the question like, what do we actually need to teach our kids in the classroom and what are we actually hoping to measure?
Right. 2001 was No Child Left Behind.
Mhm.
And I believe at that point is when they went to more of a teach the test model. Things became more contingent on test scores.
Yes.
And now the college application process, it's always been there. It's become more competitive than ever. Uh,
Mhm.
this push towards kids going to the schools down in the South, yet a lot of the most competitive schools are in the North.
Yeah.
And COVID during that time as well, uh, they went to a test optional model, but now that has is going by the wayside. Meaning we're
Mhm.
starting to weigh those scores even more.
Yeah.
And listen, the answers that kids get on artificial intelligence, they're cheap, right?
Yes.
The reasoning is where the real value is. And just judging kids based on their test scores is, to me, it's almost as similar to artificial intelligence. Like, what is that? How's that really helping, right?
Yeah.
Someone who's like a really good test taker. How do we really decide, or how do colleges decide, or teachers decide how to grade students? Well, the reasoning just becomes so much more valuable, and
Yes.
kids need to know how to spot errors and then make sense of results. And then again, the executive functioning piece is finding the right strategies. And a big one is explaining why something works. And I think that's really where the real thinking lives.
Yeah. I agree with you. In the math world, we have seen a big shift in our pedagogical practices of doing more of that problem solving and engaging students in the productive struggle to really elicit and value their thinking more than their ability to get answers, right? Because Desmos exists, calculators exist, photo math exists. Their ability to get the solution it is there at their fingertips, right? Whether they've memorized those procedures or not, but their ability to think and reason through and spot those errors or assess whether like that response is actually valuable is so much more of what matters to me as a teacher than their ability to know that the log base 2 of 8 is 3. Like you can type a button in a calculator and tell me that. That's not giving me information that's useful in really assessing you as a human.
Right, right. And AI should not be treated like you or me, right? It's not a tutor, it's not a teacher, and it can be treated like a shortcut machine, but it should really be a way where kids can learn how to maybe cut down on time or
Mhm.
enhance some of the technological tools that we already have. And if a student is stuck, it's great to ask them, can you explain this step? Or why does this method work? And the problem is that when students jump straight to the final answer and they skip the thinking, then it's almost like going into the back of the book, right? Remember those days where the
Oh, yeah.
teacher would give you odd answers? You'd be like, yes, I can look up
Yes.
the answers just in case. But with AI, it actually will give the explanations, which is a really major asset when learning any type of skill. But again, without the human element to it, without being able to ask follow-up questions and hear a voice,
Mhm.
make eye contact with someone, even if it's over a screen, that's something again that AI can't replace.
You're right. You're so right. Information really isn't scarce anymore. It became less scarce when we moved from textbooks to the internet, and it's even less scarce now that we have technology in our pockets, and even less scarce now that we have AI. And so, if this information is no longer scarce, like that's not our issue anymore. What kind of skills do you think that schools should be prioritizing really to support more of that meaningful human development?
Well, the executive functioning piece is where it gets a little interesting, because executive functioning is about planning, self-regulating, sustained effort, which we see in organizing, planning, and
Yeah.
prioritizing, right? All these different frontal lobe uh, tasks, and that's where the skill set really does come from. AI can support those skills, or they can weaken them.
Mm.
And if a student relies on AI to instantly solve a problem, they may lose patience with the learning process, become a little more frustrated when there's not instant gratification, and then avoid that productive struggle. But AI can also help students, like I mentioned, with organize the information and break it down into more manageable tasks. So the real issue isn't necessarily the technology, but it's the habits that
Mhm.
students need to build around it. and they still need to develop discipline and persistence and again those decision making skills. So those skills become even more important in a world where tools can do so much more and so much more quickly.
Absolutely. Um, you you're making me think, I we've got these tools and we wanna be able to use them effectively and impactfully. What do you think that educators can do, though, to preserve and strengthen that human connection when we have so many of those tools available, right? What's your thoughts on how we can kind of balance that out and make sure we're really making the most of that human element?
Always have to assume that when kids go home or they're in study hall, right, they're going to have their devices, right? The
Mhm.
devices are always there, whether it's their desktop or their phones,
Yeah.
and maximizing the human element, the relationship building. And project-based learning it started to become a bigger thing when I was actually leaving the classroom
Woohoo.
around 10 years ago. And I kind of poo-pooed it a little bit because I like the idea of the teacher is in the class and then differentiating in the instruction, of course,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
Differentiate the content, the process, and the product, very
Yep.
important. But now I see how valuable that is because we have to have kids that are interacting with each other as much as they're interacting with adults, if not even more. So one thing that I don't necessarily like that I think pushes kids more towards using AI, and this happens more in private schools, where teachers in the advanced classes will put a problem on the board and they'll say, all right, go, and they haven't worked on this before. It might be
Sure.
an extra step involved.
Yeah.
And, really bright kids might be able to figure that out. But let's say for the kids who are kind of in the middle on the upper level
Mhm.
scale, they're so used to looking at the answer when they don't know something, they're just lost.
Yeah.
They're just lost. So I think increasing that human connection and teaching kids how do we learn together, right? If they put them in groups, right? Who's going to be the group leader? Who's going to be the scribe? Who's going to have each individual task? Because that's also going to help them when they go out into the real world, especially if they go into a corporate setting where they're probably in a lot of situations going to be working on teams.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, you just hit on so many of the things that I know and love. I spent the first 10 years of education in a fully project-based school. So that is my jam. And my favorite part about teaching with project-based learning was the fact that it was so connected to the students and themselves. And we were designing projects together, right? And they had to collaborate with one another and actively problem solve. There wasn't something that they could just go and look up and be like, oh, okay, here's the answer to the problem. And when they got stuck, they genuinely had to lean on each other and lean on their resources. And I would love to see that the rise of AI maybe pushes the catalyst kind of back that direction of, well, we need to be teaching in a way that's more authentic and giving these students a chance to interact, like you're saying, how they're going to when they're out in the real world with these different roles. And how do you manage a team and how do you collaborate together to get something done?
Yes, there's so many opportunities that teachers have. And I think that the ones who, even before project-based learning became more well-known and more well-used, is they would put kids into a group. And I don't know how much thinking would go into pairings,
Mm.
but what would wind up happening is nobody would know what their role was. Like they would be left to
Yeah.
decide. And I think it's like any content, right? You have to explain it. And as a math teacher, you have to break it down and scaffold it.
Mhm.
And what winds up happening most of the time is that one person does the work. Even if other kids want to participate, I see this a lot when I ask questions about group projects. And someone will say, I want to get a good grade. I don't trust you, or I don't know you, or I think you're not
Yep.
as bright as me. So I'm going to then take everything. Just take the good grade. I'm here. I got this. And we don't want that
Yeah.
at all. And we want kids to feel valuable when it comes to group settings. So how AI works into that, I mean, maybe there needs to be some type of maybe one device inside the group, or they need to
Mm.
find the information somewhere. Again, we want to maximize the time effective or the time cutting nature of having the intelligence. But again, just putting multiple brains together and setting out those roles is key.
I love that. Yes, I completely agree that they need to know what their roles are and they need to understand what that role really does. That is something that in my own teaching classroom this year has been more important to me as I engage my students with more of this inquiry-based learning instead of giving like, let's all get the right answer, right? It's much more exploratory. And you're right, that's a skill that has to be taught to our students, how to take on those different roles. Because as you were saying, when students are left to pick their own roles or decide how they're going to work together, it really becomes a like, I don't know who you, I don't trust you. This is not going to work out well for us. And I don't know how much you know about what's happening in math ed right now, but the building thinking classrooms has been huge. And one of their key elements is that when students are working together in their groups of 3, only one person gets the marker, but that person who's doing the writing isn't allowed to be the one who's asking the questions and like getting the thinking going. So it really gives them that role. And so when you mentioned having the one computer, I could imagine that same aspect of one student has the device in front of them, but they're using it to help answer what the rest of that group is asking of them. Right. So it's not just their thought and they're doing it independently. They're doing it based on what the group's saying. So I think that's a really cool takeaway.
Yeah, and you got me thinking also as you were talking that those classes in the private schools and the upper level classes like for juniors
Hmm.
and seniors or the honors level where they have the teacher who comes into the class and writes the problem on the board and says
Oh,
solve
yeah.
this, which
Yeah.
is a very high level skill to be able to do that, right?
Absolutely.
Is and I don't get the sense they do this, but that would be a great opportunity to put them in pair shares, right? Just
Yeah.
a think pair share and at least have that be a part of it, especially for really difficult problems. And then they're obviously when they're taking a test, they're going to be taking that individually. But that might be a situation where they don't even need AI, but at least they could have it available. And but that's just basically emphasizing the interpersonal skills and also teaching kids that they don't need the device for every project. A bigger group project would probably do, right? Have to get the information from somewhere.
Sure, sure.
But one problem on the board, like how do we work together to solve this? I think that would be a really good idea.
I love that. That actually mirrors what I did in college so much. It was me and all the other math teachers. We called ourselves the future math teachers of America, right? And we'd be in the math learning center and just writing the problems on the board and like, okay, who has an idea? Where do we get started? What are we going to do? Let's try it together. And you're right. I think that collaborative aspect is something we should be focusing in on as a way to keep the human content and connection there when AI could just take us other places.
Exactly.
Absolutely. So, Aaron, if you could encourage educators to shift one mindset as AI is becoming more present in schools, what do you think that shift would be?
I think that we need to leverage what is there and
Mm.
stop playing police. AI
Yes.
is here, right?
Yep.
It's
It
a
is.
it's a mindset shift. And when they stop, give you a quick example. I have a student who goes to UConn Stanford. I was working with today, and he has a test coming up on these books that he had to read, and like a traditional test, which I don't see as much when it comes to reading books to have an actual test. But there was directions about the lockdown browser, and
Mm.
in my brain, I went to, well, I could just take my phone and put it up against the device. And he said, well, it measures your eyes. Like I'm like plotting in my head of what I
Yeah.
would do as a student, right?
Yeah.
Stop doing that, right? That would be my thing. Stop with the lockdown browsers.
Yeah.
Stop trying to police something that can't be policed, right? It's like the proverbial putting the toothpaste back in the tube. So
Yep.
whether it's college students or whether it's high school, all the way down to elementary,
Oh,
become an expert. You're an expert educator, you're a certified teacher, or you're working in a private school, whatever it may be, or you have your PhD,
yeah.
learn the technology inside and out. And then how does that technology apply to your content specialty, even in special education,
Ooh.
which is more general or global?
Yeah.
And if they can do that and teach kids how to use it effectively, which is what I do, right? This is literally what I do. So let me
Right.
show you how to use this. If they don't go to just the shortcut model and they know like, oh, if I've read a research paper, I can use AI to help me save what could take hours to look up sources. And then I can use my thinking to come up with a thesis and start outlining the paragraphs.
Yes.
If teachers allow kids to have somewhat of a say, saying, hey, you can use AI for this part, but I don't want you to use it for that part, there's always going to be a few who will take the shortcut no matter what.
Of
But it's
course.
it's like when you invite kids into a classroom behavior plan, or even in the home, saying, all right, what's your punishment going to be? Or what is your reward going to be? If there
Yeah.
is a reward or an outline structure, and the teacher can model that, I think they'll have a better chance of having kids use it efficiently, which will increase outcomes. It will increase interpersonal connection in the classroom. And I think that it has to start with who is leading the class. It has to start with the adults, because
Mm.
kids are looking for shortcuts. So modeling the behavior is a really big part of that. And also, when kids see that teachers are using AI, like when they see a document that is obviously in
Oh,
chat
yeah.
manner, right? They're
Yeah.
going to lose those kids, especially when they're telling you you can't use that. They don't like that. Kids
Right.
don't like hypocrisy. That's why I'm very sensitive about that. I don't want kids to ever think I'm being a hypocrite, because then we lose respect, and then the interpersonal connection breaks. And what's there? There's AI.
Yeah, yeah, then they can go back to that shortcut and shortchange their thinking and their education. You are so right, and I love the thinking back to how can we use technology as experts. Like, we all went through the educational programs. Hopefully, we know that TPAC model, right? As soon as you said that, I was like, I remember that, the technology, pedagogy, and content knowledge, right?
Yeah,
TPACK, that one, that one. I was like, I remember that framework. You're right. It's time we bring that back into play, because AI is here. You're right. We are not putting that toothpaste back in a tube. So we need to be thinking smarter about how we're going to engage our students with it and how we can use it and model those best practices so that the students learn that skill, because they're going to need it in the future. But also so that we can preserve those opportunities for the critical thinking and the problem solving and that human element that we still need to harness and grow in our classrooms.
that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
The more technology that enters the classroom, the more important that human connection is going to be. And learning still happens best when students feel known, when they're challenged, but also supported. So
Mhm.
AI could really help us turn the corner in producing those outcomes with kids.
That's incredible. I feel like that sums up my last question that I had for you. What do you hope we protect most in education as technology continues to evolve and infiltrate?
Based on this conversation, I'm sure this isn't going to be a surprise, but it's the human connection
Yeah.
element. There was a 60 Minutes program, maybe it was like a year ago, when they were monitoring a class that introduced AI to the classroom. And it seemed great on the surface, but they were using the AI as like a paraprofessional. It was
Mm.
almost like too much, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know what that pilot program is doing. I know there are schools that are completely AI. I know there are some schools that are completely averse to it. Around here, it's somewhere in the middle. But if we get this right, AI will not replace thinking. It's going to actually raise the bar. The
Ooh.
goal isn't to protect some old system, because the old system is gone.
Yes.
The goal is to just help students become thoughtful and disciplined and independent in a world where they have these powerful tools that are absolutely everywhere. So having kids become less reliant on the technology, but be able to leverage it in the most helpful and healthy way, I think that's really the goal that I would have for kids and for the educators who are really in charge of disseminating these tools to be leveraged in the most effective way possible.
Absolutely. I 100% agree that's a hope for what we can have for education in the future. And Aaron, just thank you so much for this conversation. I really appreciate your perspective, focusing on the human development and how we can keep that still at the forefront of those relationship buildings and that meaningful learning. I would love to know, because I'm sure my listeners are going to want to know, if they want to get in contact with you and learn more from you or learn more about your executive function coaching, any of those things, where can they connect with you to get in contact with you and hear from you?
Well, you can definitely find me on my website. That's probably the a way that the parents could find me, which
Yeah.
is www.desgct.com, or all my socials. I am everywhere. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. I'm on X, Substack. You name it, I am
Okay.
there.
Ooh.
So if you just put my name in there, you can find me. But on my website, you'll find a lot of my blogs and my philosophies on how I believe education is the most important thing that we have in this world.
Oh my gosh, I love that. All right, everybody. So you've heard, you can go to the website. I will link it here in the show notes. You can go and read more. And then it seems you can connect with Aron basically anywhere. So whatever social is your go-to, it sounds like Aron's got that. So we'll make sure that we leave those linked in the show notes. Aron, again, thank you so much for joining me today for this conversation. AI conversations can so often be just about the tools and the technology. And I really, again, appreciate your thoughts around that human development and aspect and how we can keep the human touch in education. So thank you so much for being here, Aron.
And thanks for having me. It was a great conversation.
Absolutely. All right. Until next time, modern math teacher, you guys keep the human element connection going. And as always, keep it real.